Hey everyone, Nate here. Now, let's be honest, I'm sure there's been a time for all of you, myself included, and it could even be right now, that you thought if you only had this one piece of gear, it would all be so much better. I gotta tell you, that's usually a lie. In the end, it's not the gear, it's you. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? Now, a lot of individuals, and again, myself included in the past, used to have the thought that if I just had this one amp, or if I just had this one guitar, if I just used this one pick or this string gauge, everything will change. My tone will get better. I'll have a better sound in general. Maybe for drummers, if you thought if you just changed a cymbal, everything would get so much brighter. Or if you just got one extra floor tom, everything would be better. Or a sample padlet. All these things that we think of. Studio engineers are the worst for this because they have gear envy of really expensive items, but even musicians on any level can have the same thing happen. Usually this comes up when we are trying to mask things that maybe we aren't particularly proficient in yet. Maybe you're not getting a chunky tone because you're not palm muting and chugging properly and attacking the strings. Now, there are moments where maybe string gauge is a factor or pick is a factor, and there are even moments down the line in musical careers where better gear is better for the musician. But that is a goal to step towards, not one to try to use as a crutch that holds you back. There are numerous pieces of cheap gear, especially like say guitars or basses that sound phenomenal, that if you just maintain them properly or if you just practiced, you would actually be able to get the sound you're looking for. A better amp, a better guitar, a better mic, none of that is going to help you until you're able to use what you have properly. Only when the hindrance of the instrument or the gear is legitimately holding you back do you need to start looking for other options. Sometimes we even look at this as a situation where we feel like we are unable to practice and we can only do so if we have adequate gear. This can mainly be found for individuals that use very loud instruments like drums. Now, drumming can be a very difficult thing to practice if you think that you need your kit. But if you think ergonomically with where everything is placed, you can imagine where everything is. If I said right here in front of me, add a snare, you're probably able to think of like a sound coming from it. I know I can right now by doing this, and I can even picture a tom, and a tom, some cymbals, maybe a ride, maybe my crash, and a hi-hat. And with my feet, I can also now sit down and just imagine the drum kit and sit with my headphones in and practice to whatever song or listen to whatever's and mime what it is I'm doing. Gene Hoglan is a phenomenal drummer who does this a lot. A lot of the times he doesn't practice behind the kit. He just listens to the music and does the mental practice, and sometimes practices the movements and the rhythms so that his body is used to reacting in that way. Drummers can do this, and guitarists can do this if you are able to work on your ear and imagine notes. Eventually, after a certain point of time, you'll be able to imagine a fretboard, and you can at least work on the fingering. It seems really weird, but if you can visually imagine yourself doing something and teach yourself the motions, you'll be able to transcribe that to your instrument, meaning maybe you don't need an electric drum kit that costs $1,500 to $2,000 just to practice at home. They are great writing tools and they are great practice tools, but if they aren't a necessity, there are ways to get around it. For this video, I also figured it'd be better for me to explain different instances where I personally did this. And I will admit, when I was a new musician, I was absolutely horrible at using gear as an excuse. As a vocalist, I started out when I was about 17 actually working on screaming and singing. And I didn't start figuring out how to properly sing and scream for years and years. I sounded like complete and utter ass. And I thought I did some research and figured out everyone uses an SM58 for their vocals. So I figured if I only got an SM58, that would make me sound so much better. Well, I still sounded like shit. The mic didn't change a goddamn thing. And I foolishly didn't hold on to my purchase. I returned it and blamed the gear for not sounding how I wanted, instead of being able to recognize my naivete that I just wasn't that good. And I was a beginner, so it shouldn't have been that hard for me to just accept that I was learning and I probably wasn't able to create the sounds I was thinking of and I would need to work on it. But instead, I blamed the gear. I also at one point had a bunch of guitars because I didn't really practice, but I liked having a bunch of things in different tunings. And I liked being able to just grab something and play and mess around. To an extent, it was nice, but looking back, I only have a few of those guitars left, and they're the ones that I played over and over and over again. One of them hasn't left drop C since my second band, and I even think my first band played that guitar in the same tuning, so it might have even held it for even longer, but I found what I liked with it. Instead of thinking of excuses for it, I utilized the tool for what it was best at. Same with my other guitars and all my other gear that I've held on to over the past years. It's not the expensive stuff that gets stuff done, it's how you utilize it. There's one other piece of gear I got in a situation like this. When I needed to upgrade my amp, instead of doing better research, I had been sold on the Line 6 Spider series. And this was 5-6 years ago when they were still rather popular. And I thought, well, I don't want to work with a bunch of pedals. I want something that does everything at once. And I didn't really think about what it was I needed. I just got something that could do everything okay. And I spent way more than I should have. And granted, the amp has done a lot for me in gigging. It is not good for what I want it to do. And quite frankly, looking back, it's not worth what I paid for. I would have been a lot better doing a bit more research and getting a different cab and amp combo to go with what I was doing, and maybe investing in a pedal or two just for the sake of being able to control what I wanted and not letting a vast array of possible options that sounded meh dictate what I had at my disposal. And ultimately, that's what taught me that gear isn't important. I've been using some low-end mics and preamps and recording interfaces for a long time and just starting to upgrade now out of necessity. But for the longest time, I've been able to get away, and still can to an extent, get away with using things that maybe at first wouldn't seem like the best option, but due to learning how they work and how they sound, I can get fairly decent results out of it. My drum kit, for instance, sounds phenomenal when I reskin it. If your drum kit doesn't sound the way you want it to, and you think that replacing the shells is the only way to do it, make sure you reskin it and tune it first, because maybe the skins are just old and maybe it's just out of tune. So with that, just know that it is completely up to you and what effort you will put into it. The gear will not dictate how you sound as a musician. That is all on you. Without further ado, I'll see you all next week.